All right, listeners, so we're diving right into this Newsweek poll that everyone's talking about. It's getting down to crunch time for this election. And this poll is all about swing states, those,
Yeah.
those all-important swing states, the ones that can really make or break a campaign.
Right.
And this one's got people talking because it's hinting at some pretty unexpected changes, particularly in some states that have been pretty reliably Democrat. Like we're maybe seeing cracks in the blue wall kind of stuff.
Yeah, these swing states are really fascinating because they often end up being like a microcosm of the national mood.
Oh, absolutely.
They can really give us some insight into where the country as a whole might be heading.
Totally. And this poll, it suggests that Trump is actually ahead of Harris in 5 out of 7 of the main battleground states. And we're talking places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, places that have been pretty solidly blue in recent elections.
Yeah, 5 out of 7, that's a big deal.
Right.
It really throws a wrench into a lot of the pre-election predictions, and it shows that this race is potentially way more volatile than people thought.
It's true, and I will say before everyone listening starts panicking, the margin of error is worth noting. It's only a couple of percentage points either way, so it's still anyone's game.
Oh, for sure. But, even a small shift in these swing states, it can have a huge ripple effect on the whole electoral map. It means that every single vote carries even more weight now.
Absolutely every vote counts. It seems like pollsters are really stepping up their game, too, this close to the election, trying to be as accurate as possible. This poll, for example, was done by AtlasIntel, and they're the same group that 538, that website that analyzes polls. They said AtlasIntel was the most accurate back in 2020. So these numbers are definitely worth paying attention to. What I found really interesting, though, was digging into the potential reasons behind these shifts. And the article highlights this fascinating case in North Carolina, where a local controversy might actually be having an impact on the national race.
Oh, yeah, the North Carolina situation is really interesting.
Right.
It really caught my eye, too.
Because right as this poll was being conducted, there was this whole thing blowing up around Mark Robinson. He's the gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina, and he's got Trump's endorsement.
Yeah.
But he got caught up in some controversy over some old online comments he made.
Yeah, he used the term black Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine that caused a lot of outrage. People were calling for him to drop out of the race immediately.
Understandably so. That's not language you want to hear from someone running for office. But here's where it gets really interesting from an election strategy point of view. This controversy, it blew up at the exact same time that AtlasIntel was polling voters in North Carolina. So it's possible that it influenced how those voters are thinking about the presidential race, too.
Oh, absolutely. The timing of it is really key. When you're looking at a poll, you always have to think about the context. What's happening in the news? What are people talking about? All of that can have an impact on how people respond to poll questions.
Oh, and it's like, those ripples spreading out. You know how something happening at a local level can suddenly become a national story?
Yeah, it's a great example of how interconnected these races can be.
Right.
And it shows how important context is when you're trying to understand these polls. It's not just about the numbers themselves, but it's about understanding the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The events and the narratives that are shaping public opinion at that particular moment in time.
Which kind of leads us to the million-dollar question, right? What does all of this tell us about the potential outcome of the election?
Well, I think it's a good reminder that this election is far from over. There's still a lot that could happen between now and November.
Yeah.
A lot of
that's
people
smart.
might have assumed that one candidate or the other was a shoo-in, but this poll suggests that it's going to be a much closer race than anyone expected.
Oh, definitely. So let's play out some scenarios here. What happens if Harris wins those traditionally blue states, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, those key states?
Well, if she can hold on to those states, she'll be in a very strong position to win the election.
Makes sense.
But on the other hand, if Trump manages to flip Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, then we could be looking at a very different outcome.
Wow. So it really is anyone's game at this point.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the Sun Belt states either. Places like Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, those are going to be absolutely crucial. And the polls are showing a real toss-up in those states.
It's like a political chess match.
Exactly. Every move matters.
Every single vote could make the difference. And it seems like this election might come down to individual voters making their choices based on a whole bunch of different factors, not just sticking to their party lines like they might have in the past. There was this one line in the article that really stood out to me. It talked about ticket splitting.
Oh, yeah, ticket splitting.
Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah. It's a really interesting phenomenon. It basically means that someone might vote for one party for president and then a different party for, say, senator or governor.
Oh, wow.
And it tends to happen more often in swing states where the races are really tight and voters are really paying attention to the individual candidates.
So instead of just voting straight down the party line, they're really thinking about each candidate and each race separately.
Right, and I think it reflects the fact that people are becoming more and more disillusioned with the two major parties. They're not afraid to mix and match their votes to try to get the outcome that they want.
It's like those assumptions about red states and blue states might not be so accurate anymore.
Yeah, I think those labels are becoming less and less useful. At the end of the day, we're talking about individuals making decisions based on their own values and beliefs.
Exactly.
And those values and beliefs, they don't always fit neatly into those red and blue boxes.
That's a really good point. It really makes those swing states so interesting to watch, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
They're like the ultimate battleground for ideas, and they really reflect how diverse our country is in terms of opinions and beliefs.
And how unpredictable things can be. This poll, it's just a snapshot in time. But it reminds us that this election is far from over. Anything could happen.
It's true. It's a good reminder for all of us to stay engaged.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what's happening both nationally and in those swing states. And don't just read the headlines. Dig a little deeper. Try to understand the nuances of what's going on.
Absolutely. And don't get discouraged if it feels complicated.
Right.
That's the thing about democracy. It's messy.
It is.
But it's also incredibly important.
It is so important. Well said. So to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, the only poll that truly matters is the one on Election Day.
That's right.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, get out there and vote. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the most important and interesting stories of the day. Until then, take care.